If you've been following the SoCHiology podcast since I launched it in 2021, you will be aware of the reverse psychology subseries, which is basically unpopular Chicago opinions from Chicago. You will also be aware of the SAT, the SoCHiology awareness test, where I quiz random Chicagoans about different questions in regards to Chicago history and culture. Well, this Black History Month, I'm introducing the ChicaGOATS sub-series. This is basically a Black Chicago history blitz that details and gives brief summaries of different Black Chicagoans that lived in our city and did great things in their respective careers and left a huge impact not on the city but on the entire world. So without further ado, let's get into it. From Harold Washington to Harold's Chicken and everything in between and beyond, this is SoCHiology. What's up, everybody? It's Twiz Taylor. Welcome back to another episode of SoCHiology. And on this episode of the Black Chicago History Blitz, I'm talking about the mayor, Harold Washington. And this is one of those individuals where it doesn't get much more Chicago than this, right? I mean, the man was born in Bronzeville. He attended DeSoto High School. Then after he left, he served in World War II in the Pacific Theater. Then he came back home to Chicago and enrolled at the Roosevelt University. It was called the Roosevelt College, I believe, at the time. But he enrolled at Roosevelt, became a student leader there. And then after he graduated from Roosevelt, he enrolled at the Northwestern School of Law, where he got his law degree in 1952. Then he went on to serve in the Illinois House of Representatives. Then he served in the Illinois Senate. Eventually, he was elected to Congress, representing the Illinois 1st District in the U.S. House of Representatives. He did all of that before returning home to Chicago again and being elected as the 51st mayor of the city and the first Black mayor in 1983. I actually did a couple episodes on Harold Washington's administration and his tenure as mayor. Go listen to those with Jeff Spitz, The Only Washington We Acknowledge, as well as the Council Wars. Those are previous SoCHiology episodes that go in depth about Mayor Washington's mayoral administration and tenure. But he was elected for a second term in early 1987, but unfortunately he passed away later that year on November 25th. Now, the coroner's office determined that the cause of death was a heart attack caused by high blood pressure, high cholesterol, hypertension. My grandmother, I'll never forget this, my grandmother told me straight out of her mouth that Harold Washington was poisoned. Somebody poisoned his coffee, and that's how he died. And a lot of rumors like that caught wildfire during that era. Even though the coroner's office determined the opposite, that he wasn't poisoned, can you really blame my grandma and people of her generation for thinking that? I mean, think about it. This is the same generation that was living in real time, that lived through the assassination of Malcolm X in 1965, that lived through the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, that lived through the assassination of Fred Hampton Sr., the chairman, in their own backyard on the west side of the city at the hands of the Chicago Police Department in 1969. So when you look at the world through my grandma and the individuals of her generation lens, especially in Chicago, Chicagoans are like everybody else, but only more so, right? The racism was very intense, very overt during these decades. When you look at the world through their lens, can you really blame them for thinking that another titanic leader in the Black community, such as Harold Washington, abruptly dies? Can you really blame them for believing that it was some funny business going on, that it was foul play? You can't blame them for that. But nonetheless, here in 2024, all these years later, almost 40 years later, Harold Washington's legacy still looms large in the city. He has many namesakes. I mean, the Harold Washington Library, the main Chicago Public Library site. You have the Winter Garden on the 9th floor. It's very beautiful, a lot of natural light. But next door to that, you have a permanent exhibit of Harold Washington's political career. You have the Harold Washington Park in Hyde Park. You have the Harold Washington Cultural Center in Bronzeville. You have Harold Washington College, which is part of the City Colleges of Chicago system. You have Harold Washington Elementary School. There's not many places you can go in Chicago where you won't see or hear Harold Washington's name and face. Harold Washington was a huge influence to Barack Obama, they say. But it's my opinion that no politician or mayor worked harder to unify the city of Chicago and to empower and encourage Black Chicago more than Harold Washington. He currently rests at the Oakwood Cemetery in the Woodlawn neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. If you enjoyed this podcast, I ask for two things and I will love you forever. Number one, please engage with us on social media. So like, share, subscribe, and comment on whatever platform you're listening to it on. And number two, please make sure you pass it on to a friend who will enjoy it as well.